Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're diving into a massive economic mystery. You see, the United States launched a trade war to try and kneecap China's export machine, but somehow, China just turned around and shattered a world record. So how on earth did that happen? Let's unpack it. Okay, first, let's just get our heads around this number. In the first 11 months of 2023, China's trade surplus, that's the gap between what it sells to the world and what it buys, hit an absolutely staggering $1.08 trillion. I mean, that is a historic, almost unbelievable figure. And right here is where the real paradox kicks in. This record wasn't set during some golden age of free trade. Nope. It happened while the US was actively trying to stop it, slapping on huge tariffs to make Chinese goods way too expensive for Americans. So what's the deal? Well, if you just glance at the numbers, it looks like the American plan actually worked. Direct exports from China to the US totally collapsed, falling by almost 29%. Now, that should have been a knockout blow to China's surplus, right? But it wasn't. And figuring out why, well, that's what this is all about. So, how did China manage to pull this off? Well, the first part of the answer is actually pretty simple. If someone slams the front door in your face, you go look for a side window. And let me tell you, China found a lot of side windows. This chart right here really paints a picture of that closed front door. The US market, which used to be China's biggest customer, just vanishes. You see that massive, nearly 30% drop in shipments. That is the trade war in action, a direct hit. But, and this is a big but, it's only half the story. And here's where you see those side windows get thrown wide open. China completely made up for the American downturn by just flooding other markets with its goods. Exports to Australia, they surged by almost 36%. The European Union saw a nearly 15% jump, and the ASEAN nations in Southeast Asia grew over 8%, actually becoming China's biggest trading partner. But you know, finding new customers isn't the only play in the book. The next piece of this puzzle is a little more cloak and dagger. It suggests that even with all those tariffs, Chinese goods are still finding a secret back door right into the United States. Economists have a name for it, trade rerouting. And here's the basic idea of how it works. Instead of shipping a finished product straight to the US and getting hit with a huge tax, Chinese companies send parts, or maybe nearly finished goods, to a third country, think Vietnam or Mexico. There, the stuff gets a final tweak, gets put in a new box, and then gets shipped to the US as if it was made in Vietnam or Mexico, completely dodging the tariffs. And the data really seems to back this up. It's pretty telling. For instance, at the exact same time that direct furniture exports from China to the US were plummeting, furniture exports from Vietnam to the US absolutely skyrocketed. It really suggests that these countries are basically becoming giant hubs in a new, more complex global supply chain. Okay, so this is about more than just where the goods are going. It's also about what those goods actually are. Because this isn't your grandfather's made in China. The country's entire industrial strategy has gone through this radical transformation. The real engine powering this whole trillion-dollar surplus is something analysts are calling the new three. And we are talking about high-tech, high-value stuff. Electric vehicles, where China is now the world's #1 car exporter. Lithium-ion batteries, where they pretty much own the market. And solar cells, which they are just churning out in unbelievable quantities. I mean, this slide just lays it out so clearly, the incredible speed of this shift. Think about it. A decade ago, the Made in China label was on toys, clothes, cheap stuff. Today, the new China is exporting advanced technology. And just look at legacy semiconductors. Those are the chips in your car, your microwave. Exports of those are up nearly 25%. This is a massive, fundamental economic pivot. But hold on, because here's the final and, honestly, the most surprising piece of the whole puzzle. What if this record-breaking number, this sign of incredible strength, is also hiding a sign of a deep, serious problem inside China's own economy? So, really quick, just a refresher on the basic math. A trade surplus is super simple. It's your exports minus your imports. We spent a lot of time talking about the export side of that equation. Now we got to look at the other side. And here is the twist that just flips this whole story on its head. China's surplus is so gigantic, not just because they're selling a ton of stuff to the world, but because they're buying almost nothing from the world. Their import growth is incredibly weak, almost flat. So why aren't they buying? Well, this weakness points to some major problems back home. They have an ongoing property crisis, which means they don't need to import as many building materials. Consumer confidence is in the tank, so Chinese families are saving their money like crazy instead of spending it on foreign goods. So in a really strange way, their own domestic weakness is actually pumping up their international trade numbers. So what does this all mean for the rest of us? Well, this huge shift in goods, in money, in strategy is starting to cause some major geopolitical headaches. It really looks like a brand new front is opening up in the global trade wars. And this quote just says it all. With the door to America at least partially closed, China is now pointing its massive fire hose of exports directly at Europe. And you can bet European leaders are feeling the heat, leading to a huge backlash against what they call China's overcapacity, which is just a fancy way of saying its ability to make way more stuff than its own people can ever buy. The result? This pivot away from the US has created a totally new flashpoint. There are real, growing fears in places like Brussels and Berlin that a flood of cheap Chinese electric cars and solar panels is going to wipe out European industries. And that might force them to respond with their own tariffs, kicking off a whole new, and potentially very damaging, trade war between China and the EU. Which, of course, leaves us with a big final question. The US trade war didn't stop China's export machine. It just redirected the flow. So now that this torrent of advanced, high-tech Chinese goods is aimed squarely at Europe's shores, is another major global trade war simply inevitable? Honestly, that's what the entire world is now waiting to find out.